Good morning, it's Shanna. This is going to be a July wrap-up, and I'm also going to include the first couple of days of August because, in case you didn't know, I ran my half marathon, and I'm excited, and I want to talk about it, and I don't want to wait until the end of this month to talk about it. So, we're also going to talk about decks I brought in. I did not rehome any decks this month. Actually, I did gift one deck, but besides that, I haven't rehomed anything. We're going to talk about books I read, things that I did, and my guides for the month. So let's start with just kind of a catch up. This month felt busy, but in a good way. It went really fast. I have no idea where July went. We always say that. I feel like we all start every video with where did the time go, but it is what it is. It's moving quickly, and we're in August. So as you can see, I have a new tarot cloth set up here. I've mentioned in the past, or I have cat fur all up here. I've mentioned in the past I try to do it by colors. That was kind of a new thing for this year, and I'm really thrilled with the way it's been turning out. So August is kind of my yellow month, and I'm discovering that while I didn't fully recognize it in the past, I really love to work with colors seasonally, and both in the way I dress and just the way colors make me feel according to the seasons or the month of the year. And so yeah, this makes me really happy. Okay, so the first part of July, I ran a 10K here in town. It was called the Butte to Butte, and I've been wanting to do it since I moved here to Eugene, and I haven't been, until this year, I have not been consistent in my running, so it just never really happened. But this year, because I've been training for the half marathon, I was more than ready to do the 10K, which is like 6.1, I believe, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great race. It was small. I mean, the races here in Eugene are very small compared to the ones in Houston. It's not even comparable. But for what it was, I want to say, if I had to guess, maybe 500 people? I don't know. I'll look it up and put that on the screen. But it was a good time. The first leg of it was up a very steep hill, and I was like, oh, I can do this, sure, because I love running hills like a weirdo. But a few seconds into that, and I was like, yeah, no, it was very steep. So I did walk a little bit just at the beginning. The rest of the race was mostly downhill or flat, with the exception of one other small hill. And I think I ran most of it, but I did walk some of it. So I did not have a time goal in mind, but I did come in about 2 seconds slower than like an even time. And so I was like, if I had known, I could have picked up my feet a little bit faster right at the very end. But it's good motivation that I might want to give it a try again next year. So we shall see. So I'm just going to kind of go by the month. So each week, kind of how the month went, just so that I can kind of keep track of what I've talked about. So I will save the half marathon stuff at the end. That way, if you aren't interested, you can just kind of skip over that and get right to the end of the video. But for right now, let's talk about decks that I brought in, because there are a few, and I'm pretty excited about them. So the first two are ones that Robin over at Robin's Reflections talked about, and I'm pretty excited about both of them. I had never heard of this one. I had heard of this one. It was briefly on my wish list, and then it kind of came off. But when she talked about it again recently, I just, it's such a pretty deck, and I thought, why not? It wasn't terribly expensive, and actually, I was able to get a secondhand, an actual secondhand deck for relatively inexpensive. Basically, it just has these questions or journaling prompts or, meditation prompts, I guess, if you will, on the front of each. And then on the back, it goes into just more of a description of that question. And then you have a soul action and a mantra. A mantra? I think it's mantra. And Robin mentioned, which I really liked, these aren't the kind of cards that are like, do this thing to feel better, because I feel like a lot of us bristle a little bit at that, like being told what to do. This is more of like a question and a statement, know that you're not alone. Your life has purpose. It does mention God, but generally speaking, I just kind of skip over that part because I'm just not really into that. But I can look past it, and I just think it's a beautiful deck. Just the fact that it's feathers and watercolor. I guess it does say, it does give you a direction. Do a clutter detox of your schedule, home, and innermost self. Make space, clarity will come. But it doesn't feel bossy to me. I don't know. That might change over time, but for right now, it doesn't. And I like that it's just a question on the front. So if I didn't even want to flip it over necessarily, I don't have to. I can just get the message from the front and move on from there. So it's a beautiful deck, and I like the colors, and it felt very like late summer to me anyway. And I think this could go through really fall and even winter, just with the blues and the golds. So I'm pretty happy to have this one. Will it be a long-term deck? I don't know. We'll see. I just like the concept. I like the concept of these double-sided cards where you don't really need a guidebook. This one does not come with a guidebook, which is fine. Like I said, everything you need is on the card. So I'm excited to have this one. And I have found myself getting a little bit, I don't know if bored's the right word, but maybe bored with Lionheart's journal prompts. And I've been struggling to get them put into my planner each month. Like I've mentioned in the past, I write each of his prompts on the month view in my, well, it's not my planner. It is technically a planner, but I use it as a journal, my grimoire, book of shadows, all the things, tarot journal. So I write those in so I don't have to use my phone when I'm looking for a prompt. But for whatever reason, I'm kind of struggling to use those. I'm just not quite connecting to them. So this might be a good alternative to that. And I will say for the record, I am still writing them in my planner because my journal, because it's July, I've filled it out through July, so now I have to finish the year. I can't have August through December just blank. So all right, and this one is a tapping card or tapping deck. I had previously heard this lid is very tight, but I had heard previously of tapping solution where I don't remember what they're called. You have certain points on your body, tapping points. And to calm yourself, I think this is a relatively new concept, I think. To calm yourself, like if you're in an anxious mood or you need to, self-soothe or ground, you can tap these points on your body and it helps to calm you down and ground you. Someone's mowing the lawn. Why is it always right now? Anyway, I've not dug too much into the guidebook. I did read the beginning. I am one of those people who I don't absorb and retain information very well. So, here's the table of contents if you're curious. Like I said, I did see this on Robin's channel, so I believe she's got, I don't think it's a walkthrough, though I could be wrong. I think she just talked about it. But I thought it was a great way to dip my toes into the idea of tapping, and it would be a relatively easy way to calm myself, like at work, take a break and go into the break room or into the office and do these meditations. I might even wind up taking this to work now that I say that out loud. And I liked the idea of having a deck because, we're all into decks. So, here I am thinking these are description cards and it's the back of each. So I thought the artwork was gorgeous. I think that's what drew me in from the first place or in the first place. I love this one. So pretty. The colors are nice. And I don't think this is AI because I think it's a relatively, let's look at the date. Oh, it's 2025. So is it AI? I don't know. I'm going to go with could be, since it doesn't say an author. So, well, that's actually kind of a disappointment. I did not consider that when I bought it, so my bad. All artwork is copyrighted by the artist and may not be reproduced, so maybe not. Oh, okay. Artwork for the deck was created using a combination of generative AI and conventional digital illustration. So it does say an illustrator. So, you know, due diligence and all that. But it is what it is. It's in my house now. I'm going to use it. And I think I will be taking this to work. I like the idea of being able to take a break and, you know, okay, so then on the back, you can do each of the tapping. It gives you different affirmations, essentially, when you do it. So if you tap the side of your hand, you've got these 2 affirmations. You can tap your eyebrow and speak aloud, or think of, if you need to be quiet, you know, like if you're at work. Side of the eye, under nose, under mouth, collarbone, underarm, and top of head. And then you've got an affirmation for each. So I liked the concept of it. I do find myself occasionally needing to, like, you know, take a 5-minute break just to step away, or, you know, maybe I'm just overstimulated, it gets too loud, or I'm just in a frustrating situation. So I thought this would be a good way to easily explore this concept. So I won't flip through all of them since this isn't really like a walkthrough, but I thought it was pretty. The end. I mean, this is just, it's very, this particular card reminds me of the Herb Crafters, which I will not compare art to whatever this is or isn't, but the concept is there and I appreciate it. And you know what, frankly, if something like this can help me feel a little more grounded and stable while at work dealing with whomever, the public or otherwise, so be it. Okay, so another deck I brought in is this one. I feel like I featured this in, oh yeah, this was in my decks I've bought twice video. I'll try to remember to link that in the cards. I had this one. I really loved it a lot. I used it, and then for whatever reason, I just felt silly. I mentioned in the other video, in the decks I bought twice video, that I had started watching Meg's video. I don't know what video it was, but she mentioned this deck. And she said that she loved it, really enjoyed using it, but that she felt a little silly using it. And I was like, yeah, same. I couldn't quite put a finger on why. But then I decided, you know what, I love the deck. And I realized, I'm not sure at what point I realized, but I realized the deck that's being re-released this month by, was it this month? Maybe it's later this year. By Lo Scarabeo, called the Crystal Tarot, is the same artist. And so I thought, you know, I'm just going to re-buy this deck. I've loved it. I've thought about it ever since I rehomed it. And it's, you know, I'm old enough now that I should not feel silly using a deck for any reason. Like, if I love it and I use it, so be it, you know? So I did. I found this. Did I buy it? This was from Amazon, but it was very cheap. I think it was like $13 or something. For a while, I thought it had gone out of print, but apparently it hasn't. Okay, so yeah, I brought this one back in. And then speaking of the Crystal Tarot, I also brought in the Crystal Tarot. This is not the new printing, though like I said, the new printing is coming out and it will be borderless. It will not have the words on it. And then I think there's just like a thin gold or maybe white border. So it's not like a thick border like this. It's sort of within the artwork. However, in looking for a used version of this, because I thought the artwork is beautiful, I realized that there is this early copy with peacocks on the back. And of course, I was like, yep, I have to have that. No questions asked. So I found a copy on eBay and snagged it for, I think it was $30. So literally, you know, it was still wrapped. It looks brand new. It's an official deck, other than this little bit of a crease, but I don't care. It's a used deck, right? Or secondhand anyway. But I just thought the artwork is beautiful. I don't think I'll use them together necessarily, though they could be used together. It's a pip deck, and I don't usually gravitate toward pip decks, but for some reason this one just was speaking to me, and again, it was $30, so I was like, you know what, why not? So this one has found a home in my closet with my morning altar and a lot of my oracle decks that I keep in there. And I like the concept that it's a pip deck, because usually if I'm in my closet, it's in the morning or it's right after work, so I don't have a lot of time. And so to be able to pull a few cards, get the exact message, because it's the Three of Cups, right? Like there's not necessarily, you don't have to take, nor do you have to take from a scenic deck. But I feel like this is such a straightforward message that when short on time, I can just, Four of Cups, boom, message, done. And I just really liked that. Obviously the majors are more scenic, but I thought the artwork was beautiful. I don't know, there's just something about it that drew me in, and I mean, look at these backs. They're so pretty. I love them. So yeah, those are two that I brought in. Also, the guidebook to the Oracle is really nice. It's very short. You get the affirmation, I guess that's what you would call it, on the card, and then also again in the guidebook. And then you can look at it as either I am confident or I can be confident. And that goes for every card. I can be daring, I can be creative. I liked the concept of it, to where depending on what you were coming to the cards for, that message would slot into the meaning for you a little easier. All right, next that I brought in was the Mindscapes. This one was a Kickstarter from, I believe, 2022, if I remember correctly. And it was just it was a majors only deck. And I did back it, and in the process of this Kickstarter, people were asking if the artist had any intentions of creating a full deck, and I believe in the beginning he had said no, but as the Kickstarter went on and as time went on in general, he decided that yes, he wanted to do a full deck. And since then, he was picked up by Hay House. That's what this is, a Hay House deck. And the whole deck was created, and now it's mass market, so everyone can enjoy it. And I think it's beautiful. I haven't really used it yet. It hasn't really found a place, but I think it will. It's a beautiful landscape. There are a few people throughout, though few and far between, and when there are people, they're very small. It's a very small aspect of the card. Of course, no cards with people will show up right now. Okay, so there's a couple right there. It's just, and I think this was oil pastels, if I remember correctly. This one is just, I'm really glad that I have it. I'm glad that I have the original majors only, but also, like, what do I do with it now? Just keep it? I don't know. So yeah, this is the Mindscapes Tarot by John Rice. Okay, and lastly, the last deck I brought in was the Little Bird Tarot 2nd edition. In case you didn't know, in case you haven't heard, this is my deck, and it is currently in pre-order over on my Etsy. There's my dryer. So if you're interested, if you've been curious about picking one up, those will be available through September 6th, I believe was the date. I'm checking here. Yes, I believe it's through the 6th. Double check the Etsy listing just to make sure, but so I will have that pre-order open until then, and then a week after that I will be processing the orders, and then it usually takes at least 2 weeks to get to me. The decks get to me, and then beyond that it'll be late September, early October when everyone receives their decks. So a few of the changes, I'll just quickly mention them because I have mentioned them exhaustively, so hopefully you're not sick of hearing of it. But I changed a few of the cards within the deck from the 1st edition. I changed the banner color from a more white to this more of a neutral tone. I updated the guidebook to include all new journal prompts. So everything, all the prompts in this second edition are different from the first. All of the field notes that are in this edition are the same. And field notes were, or are, quotes by Audubon regarding this particular image or bird. I also added color to each of the corners in the guidebook to indicate the suits, which that was my favorite part of the guidebook update. What else? There are a couple rituals in here that I've included. And then, you know, just a couple little minor changes in the front to reflect the second edition. Second edition 2025, that's on here. The first edition had just a general image with text on it that I thought was beautiful, but this one is actual writings of Audubon. It's my font, it's not his actual handwriting, but it is his actual words. So that's been changed. And then my favorite change on the box itself is that I've included the title on both sides so that if it's on your bookshelf, you can see what it is. The text on the back has been changed a little bit, and the images here have been changed. So super excited to get it going and see where it goes. So those are all the decks I brought in this month. And so I think the next thing will be the guides that I pulled. So every month, if you don't know, every week I pull a card from the Wild and Sacred Feminine deck to be my guide for that week. I've been doing it since the first week of January, and it's been an exceptionally, enlightening, enjoyable experience. And I want to say most of these cards have given me something to latch onto, sink my teeth into, consider, journal about every week. There's only been a couple of cards that I'm like, I don't know. So this month there was a couple particular cards that really stood out to me. One in particular was the Tree of Spirals, the Three of Spirals, which is the Wands. This is the Chrysalis Tarot. This was just a random pull, one day during July, and it happened to mention the Bodie Tree. That's what this is here. The Bodie Tree, because I didn't know this, I'd never heard of it. Let's see, the Bodhi tree is the tree of enlightenment in Buddhism. And so I was like, okay, cool. Like, it's a card. I journaled about it, whatever my question was for that day. And then I just put it away and I was like, cool, thanks, Well, then a couple days later, I pulled the Tree of Life as my guide for that particular week. And as I was reading through the guidebook, it mentioned the Bodhi tree. And part of the message that this card was delivering in the guidebook was that it was a reminder to tend to my relationships with other people, and that by doing that, I would revitalize my relationship with myself. And for me, that really resonated because I've been going through a couple of things at work that have been challenging, and when things get challenging, I tend to pull in and sort of just I retreat. If it's not something that I actively need to be in necessarily, I retreat. That's the easiest way. I don't want to get messed up with the drama. I just want to do my job and go home, right? So I found myself just sort of worrying about myself, me, myself, and I. And that's kind of where I was. But this was a reminder. It was kind of like saying, like, no, you need to focus on outside of yourself. You need to be working on these relationships. So I was like, well, okay. But I was like, I wasn't really sure that work was necessarily what it was talking about, but I could see how it would relate. And so part of the question with this card was that I wanted to ask myself, am I overplaying my individualism? That was a question, I believe that was a line from the guidebook. So there was it was a good little thing to think about for the week and journal on. And so part of the process of pulling this card was that I pulled another card, just a tarot card, and asked, how am I overplaying my individualism? And I got the Nine of Wands and the Tower. And so what I wrote in my journal was that I had been pushing through, imagining the worst, and felt that I needed to shoulder the burden of all of these things that were happening at work, and it was unnecessary. And instead of shrinking back and becoming quiet and hermiting, which again is a little bit of an ironic thing because my card for July is actually the Hermit here. And so it all sort of tied together, and I started seeing this pattern, this interweaving of synchronicities starting to fall into place. And I was kind of starting to put the pieces together of like, okay, now isn't the time for me to pull back. Now is the time for me to stop feeling sorry for myself, stop acting like, I had to take on this burden, and start letting my roots unfurl a little bit again, which is really hard for me, but it was a good reminder to do just that. So later in the week, I want to say it was just a couple of days later, I went to, here in town, we have what's called a metaphysical salon where we meet at like a historical house. And it's usually just a small group, like maybe 8 or 10 or 12 people, at least the ones I've been to. There've been a couple I know that were like 20 or 30 people. But we go and we just sit around in a circle, and there's usually a specific topic that we have on the docket for the evening. Things like the clairs, like clairvoyance, clairsentience. One night we talked about witchcraft. One night we talked about tarot. This particular night we were talking about past life regressions. So the cool part is that during this conversation, it was just, people kind of just free speak into the group. Like, oh, I had this experience, or sometimes we'll have a specific person who's leading the conversation. And so during this conversation, this person who was leading it mentioned the Bodie Tree. And I was like, what the hell? I had never heard of a Bodhi tree before this week. And so for me to have it come up 3 separate times in 3 very separate scenarios, I was like, okay. So I sat up, I had goosebumps, I was listening. I'm like, what am I not grasping? What am I not paying attention to? What do I need to be hearing here? So I did something that's not very common. I spoke up and I was like, hey, the Bodhi tree is something you're speaking of this tonight. This is the 3rd time I've heard of it this week. So what is the Bodhi tree? Explain to me. And I was hoping that the speaker would be able to give me more than maybe what the guidebook had done in the Chrysalis Tarot. And she did to a point. But to be perfectly honest, I couldn't repeat what she said. It didn't really like sink in. I wasn't processing it. I wasn't processing the meaning of the synchronistic Bodhi tree sightings, right? Like, well, not sightings, but you know what I mean. So one of the things in the guidebook of the Wild and Sacred Feminine is it said, I'm going to read a little bit from my journal here. It says, a Sanskrit word Bodhi means enlightenment. There's the Nikta, nature spirits related to the ancestors, and can be found at grand temples where monks reside. Monks like the one depicted on this card. Oh, excuse me, this is from the Chrysalis Tarot. It says, so the tree of life is both a source and sustainer of life, roots anchored in earth to provide sustenance in the terrestrial world, branches extended heavenward to undergrowth in spiritual realms. It says the guidebook goes on to explain in divinity, she's the Bodhi tree of enlightenment. In Buddhism, I'm reminded that when I tend to my relationships, I revitalize my connection to self. And then I kind of just go into, the next question that I asked, and then getting that 9 of Wands and the Tower. So I wrote here that it's a reminder to cast a wide net. Like, again, I don't have to internalize everything that's happening. I'm allowed to ask for help. I'm allowed to ask questions. I'm allowed to take up space when I'm uncomfortable. And I think that was a big thing for me to sort of latch onto, because again, when I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to burden anybody. So I I just fold in on myself. And I think these cards were telling me, like, stop doing that. Now is not the time for that. And then I wrote, tending to my relationship with others can be an intentional series of choices, trial and error. Let one in, and if it's not right, push them out the window. It doesn't have to be deep or serious. It can be as simple as trying them on one by one. And I thought that was, it was exactly what I needed. And so this is what I'm talking about with these guides, that just these little synchronicities throughout the weeks. I get this card and then things start cropping up and it's exactly what I'm going through and it's a good reminder. And it's just, I don't know, it's just been such a good healing, like just a general practice for me this year. So back to the metaphysical night, the metaphysical salon. One of the things that she mentioned was the yew tree, the Y-E-W, yew tree. And I don't really know what that is. So when I came home, in my head, I had a couple questions. I wondered if the yew tree and the Bodie tree were the same thing, which they are not. But when I looked it up, I started wondering if I had a card in any of my decks, if any of the decks that I had featured the yew tree. And yes, it does. So the Wisdom of Trees Oracle by Jane Struthers has a yew tree. So of course I had to pull that out. And honestly, just Googling like decks with a yew tree in it, this popped up. So I was like, oh, thank you, Google. So I pulled it out and I pulled out the guidebook and I did a little reading. And it turns out that the yew tree is viewed as a guardian of the soul by the ancient Greeks, and it's believed to be the Yggdrasil. I probably slaughtered that name. But the tree that Odin hangs from for 9 days and 9 nights, that whole story. Now the next part of this, I read on the internet that the bark of the yew tree and the leaves can be used, or are used actually, as treatment. Is that the right word? Oh, it's used as an anti-cancer component. I think it's part of the medication that goes into all the things, right? So I was like, okay. The part that gets a little crazy for me to, tarot, right? Like if you're here, you know what I'm talking about. I probably don't even need to explain it. But all of these things tied up all together, I had gone in that morning before I pulled this card, before I, heard the woman use the term yew tree, I had gone in for an ultrasound because there was a lump. We don't even need to go into where or why or how. And so I'd gone in, I had the ultrasound. And so when I read that on the card, I tried really hard not to freak out because, hello, like that's literally what I was in the doctor doing. And so I thought, okay, is this telling me that I have cancer? And I'm like, do not freak out. It's probably telling you that, the yew tree, you're going to be fine. Even if you have it, you're going to be fine. So I was like, okay, that's where I'm going to go with my thoughts. That's where I'm going to allow my thoughts to go. I would not allow myself the other path. It was too early. It was silly to torture myself with that. So of course I journaled about it and I just kind of set it aside. And I was like, okay, I don't, right now, not knowing anything, I don't have the power to do anything. So until I know for sure, I'm not going to worry about it. The good news is a few days passed and I received a letter and there's no cancer. It's not anything to be worried about. So breathed a sigh of relief. I learned something new and I felt like my guides for this month were with me, dare I say, taking me through this process of tiny little bites, giving me itty bitty little pieces to chew on and contemplate and consider while I was going through this waiting phase of waiting, for the results of this ultrasound. And I just felt like I wasn't doing it alone, and I'm not doing it alone. My husband's been great, very supportive. I chose not to tell a lot of people just because, everybody panics and I didn't want people to panic. So kept that one to myself, but everything's good. And we're going to move on from that. I just wanted to share that this process, these synchronicities is why I enjoy this process of pulling a card every week and having this guide with me. So that that was a very long description of what happened with this one particular card. So the other cards were not quite as, they didn't stand out as much. But Pearl, authenticity, I sort of felt like followed on the heels of, allowing myself to take up space and branch out and not be so in on myself, while also being authentic. I didn't have to be like extra cheerful. I didn't have to be extra like, I don't know, corporate, for lack of a better word. I could be authentic. I could be myself, and it would be accepted. Owl with awareness. One of the things that was mentioned, I believe, if I remember correctly, in the guidebook was talking about clairvoyance, which, again, just little synchronicities. I don't feel like this necessarily had to do with the other, but just that it came up, and so I understood what that meant, because, as I mentioned, one of the metaphysical salons that I'd gone to, we did talk about the clairs, all of the clairs. And so I do feel like I'm clairvoyant and to a certain degree clairsentient. And so when I pulled that, I was like, oh, okay, I know what that is. And then I think I was just kind of busy that week. I didn't make time to sit with the meaning or what was in the guidebook. But it was a good reminder from what I did read that these abilities are something that we have to cultivate and practice and revisit again and again and again throughout our lives, or they kind of wither. I don't think they necessarily go away, but they wither and they get dusty. So I needed to come to terms with the idea that if I want to get better at these clairs, I need to be better at spending time practicing them. And I think that was a good reminder to spend less time on social media, which I don't spend a lot of time on there anyway. I do spend a lot of time on YouTube. I don't necessarily feel like that counts because I'm not scrolling. I'm actively taking in information. But like TikTok, which I don't use that much anymore, and Instagram, but it's been kind of difficult because actively trying to promote yourself on Instagram, or any social media platform, it takes a lot of time. And so to be on there and to post regularly, which I'm not great at. I don't enjoy posting regularly, which I guess is a good thing to some degree, but also engaging with people, which I love because I love the connections I make here and on Instagram, but it does take time. And so when you're focusing your time in those areas, you have less time to focus on this aspect. And so it was a reminder maybe to have more balance, which I appreciate. He's kind of balanced here on the tree. All of it sort of came together as like a kind of a Two of Pentacles moment. So then the very last guide was Kalima. I believe that's how you say it. I did have to Google, I'll admit. I wondered if Kalima and Kali were the same, and they are not. But the thing that the guidebook said about her was that it was time to honor my rawness. I'm reading from my journal. Honor my rawness, my tears, and screams are part of Kali Ma's wild dance of liberation. I need to face the truth of impermanence, which leads me into the idea of perimenopause and getting older and death. Obviously that's not coming next, but just that idea that time is moving quickly and it's not going to slow down and blah, blah, blah. And I know if you're in your 20s, probably even in your 30s, you're like, heard it, whatever, boring. But I feel like once you hit your 40s and your 50s, and I'm sure that even beyond, you start kind of seeing the truth in that and just really embracing the things I'm good at, embracing the things I enjoy, embracing little moments in life that make a big impact and make whatever it is we're doing here more enjoyable. I'm sorry, because really at the end of the day, like, what's even the purpose if we're not enjoying it? Literally, like, what's the point? Because I don't know. So it was just another little reminder of being in the moment, staying grounded, staying present, enjoying the process of social media, not just doing it because I have to, not just scrolling to waste time, right? Like in doing it because I enjoy it. And so again, just another good reminder. And this month's guides, or, July's guides really drove home several points for me. And I thought that was really fantastic. So, okay, what's next? Books read. I only finished, I should say, one book. Let me pull it up here on my Goodreads. So the book I read was, let me pull it over here. My iPad's plugged in because it is so low in battery. Okay, can you see that? Yes, it was called The Change by Kirsten Miller. I feel like someone here on YouTube recommended it, or maybe it was just a random one that popped up in my feed. I don't know. So it says, in the Long Island oceanfront community of Mattock, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, 3 different women discover that midlife changes bring a whole new type of empowerment. After Nessa James' husband dies and her twin daughters leave for college, she's left alone in a trim white house not far from the ocean. Blah, 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 blah. Essentially, it's about, I thought it was going to be about these women and going through the change and a little bit of witchcraft. Because, I feel like at some point somewhere I had read something that led me to believe that. I really wanted to like the book, but I just didn't. I got about 3/4 of the way through. I probably even actually got further than that. And then I just reached a point where I was like, I can't keep going. Like, I just want to move on. I'm bored. I don't care who did it. It wound up being kind of a murder mystery, which I'm not really that into. So that sort of, spoiled it for me. I'm not really into mysteries. But there was one particular character who I felt like the book was about versus, I don't know. It kind of felt all over the place. It felt like it was a murder mystery with 3 main characters, but it only really talked about one character. And I don't feel like she was a very good character. I feel like the writing was good, but I never really got behind like the point. I didn't really care about the characters. They all felt a little bit cookie cutter. I don't know. I couldn't get behind it. I couldn't finish it. I flipped to the end to figure out who did it, and shocker, I had already guessed who had done it. So I think I gave it 3 stars. I would probably be okay giving it 2 stars. I don't recommend unless you just need something, a light, bedtime read for a few days or whatever, but don't really recommend that one. So on to my half marathon, which was amazing. I've been wanting to do this race since we moved from Texas to Oregon in 2017. I registered for it, I believe, that year to do it. I planned on running it in 2018. For whatever reason, I didn't. I decided I didn't want to go up by myself. It was a time where my husband couldn't go with me, probably for work. So I registered for it. I booked the room, and then I just never went. So 2019 rolls around. I think I just didn't register for it. And then 2020 was COVID, 2021 was COVID, 2022, I didn't feel ready. Actually, that's not true. I had trained for a full marathon that year with my best friend. And long story short, I only wound up doing half of it, which I've never done that before. I've never not finished a race. So that took a bit of a hit to my ego. And I just I didn't really fall off of running, but I wasn't training for anything. I was just kind of running to run. And then I injured my knee. Anyway, it was a whole series of multiple years where it just, years went by and I never did the race. So last year, 2024, when this race opened, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it by myself. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to train with anyone. I'm not going to run the race with anyone. I'm just going to go up there and I'll do it by myself. And so that's been the plan all along. And that's what I did. I started a run plan with the app Runna. I'll link that below in case you're curious or interested. I highly recommend. I've been thrilled with it. I haven't really I've never been able to run a whole training plan by myself and get to the end goal and then also do the race by myself. It's just not something I've done. And so for me to be able to do that was just, it was just another, dare I say, milestone for me to be able to accomplish something big, do something hard, and do it by myself. So the Friday I was going to leave to drive up there, I had plans to meet my daughter and her husband the following Saturday for breakfast. Well, Friday comes around, I planned on leaving at 1 o'clock, and around 11 o'clock, I started panicking. I was like, I can't do it. I can't drive that far by myself. It was like 3 hours. I can't drive by myself that far. I didn't want to stay at this random person's Airbnb by myself. I can't run that far. I'm not trained well. I'm going to fail. It's going to suck. And I cried, right? Like that's where I spiraled. So my husband called and he tried to talk me down, and then he called my daughter, one of my daughters, then he called my other daughter. They're all trying to call me, and I'm just like, at that point I was convinced I wasn't going. I had gotten in the car, I drove myself to McDonald's and I bought a Big Mac. That's what happened on Friday afternoon. Instead of driving myself to this race, I went to McDonald's and bought a Big Mac. So shockingly, after I ate, which tends to happen with me, it's a pattern, I came to terms with the idea that it was okay to stay home on Friday. The race wasn't until Sunday. I had not missed the opportunity, and that I would just leave Saturday. And I would have lunch with my daughter and her husband on Saturday, and I would spend one night, not two, in a random stranger's Airbnb. So that's what I did, and I felt so much better. I don't know, I just needed a good cry and a Big Mac, I guess. So yeah, I met up with them for lunch. We spent a couple hours chatting and had yummy lunch and good dessert. We talked about the houses that they're looking at. And then from there, that was in Vancouver, Washington. And then from there, I drove myself to Cascade Locks. I went to dinner. I took myself to dinner at an actual restaurant where I said, just table for one, which I've never done before. I took a book. I was prepared. I took a book and I had my reading glasses. So I sat down. After I ordered, I just opened my book and I read, while my dinner was being prepared. And I listened to people around me, and it was a lot of fun because everyone was talking about the race and what beer they were drinking and where they drove from. And it was a good experience. And I'm so happy that I had that and that I allowed myself to do it, even though it was scary. So once dinner was done, I just went back to the Airbnb and I turned on Little House on the Prairie. And that's what I watched for about 2 hours until it was bedtime. And went to bed, woke up like 4:45 in the morning and got myself ready. Had half a banana because that's all I can eat before a run. And that's only if I've got about 2 hours before the race starts. The race wouldn't start until 8. So half a banana, that's all I had, and took myself to the shuttle pickup, and the rest is history. I got on the bus and everyone was just great. Everyone's in like sweatshirts and light gloves. It wasn't very cold, but it was cold enough not to be just in our tank tops. So we go across the Bridge of the Gods into Washington, get dropped off, and at about that point, it's about 7, a little after 7. So I snapped a gorgeous picture of the sunrise and just kind of like soaked in everything happening around me and, stayed warm in my cozy sweatshirt and lined up when it was close to 8 and started the run. And I had no clue what the course was going to be like. I generally don't look at a course before a race. It's not what I do. I don't like to know. And so I ran 13 miles, and the entire race, the entire course was uphill or downhill. There was very little flat. And it was a challenge, and it was my very slowest half marathon that I've ever run, and I'm okay with it. Shockingly, I'm okay with it. I walked all of the uphills, other than like the very first one, like maybe halfway of that. I walked all the uphills, and I wasn't bothered by it. Normally that would have made me mad. I would have been frustrated. I'd have been like, oh, why are you so slow? But not this time. It was good. And it was a good experience, a good practice. I fueled well, which means for you non-runners, it means I had enough in my belly to get me through. There were, fuel stations along the way, which had Gatorade and water and goo packets. I had one goo packet, and then at like mile 7, I picked up another one thinking I might want one more, but I just carried it from mile 7 until the finish line. It was my emotional support goo packet. So I don't know, just the whole thing was great. And I'm so happy I did it. And I told my husband like 6 times, I'm like, thank you so much for making me go, because he was like, you're going to regret it. You don't have to go, but you're going to regret it. And yeah, he's right. I would have regretted it. So that was my first weekend in August. And like I said, I could have put this at the end of August as part of its wrap up, but I was too excited to share it because I know I've mentioned it multiple times over the last few months, and I just really wanted to share that with you. So I'm proud of myself, and it's not something that comes easy for me to say. So hopefully you guys can find something to do for yourselves that makes you proud of yourself and allows you to say that out loud to people, because it's a really good feeling, and I recommend it to everyone. So that is all I have for the month of July and a snippet of August. So hopefully you guys are enjoying your week, and I will catch up with you next time.